This is the City of Waupaca's City Plan Commission meeting.
All right, it's 5:15. So we'll start this regular scheduled City Planning Commission meeting. I'll call the meeting to order at, today is August 4th, 2021. In attendance are Commissioners Eric Olson, Angela Lesage, Ivan, what's your last name?
Wayne.
Ivan Wayne?
Yes.
Okay, Ivan Wayne, Mayor Brian Smith, Alan Keelan, Pat Fair, and then we also have Commissioner Justin Behrens, who's also our Director of Public Works, is on remotely with us. And then staff, we have our City Administrator, Aaron Jensen, and our Zoning Administrator, Jeff Sanders, is with us tonight, too. So before we approve the agenda, I want to just add an item, if you don't mind. After 2B and before 3, 2B, I'd like to just have public input. If we could just add that. Do we have an individual that would like to speak to the Planning Commission, and it doesn't fit under any category that's on here? So I would just like to allow him to give some public input tonight. So with that amended agenda, I'd look for a motion to approve.
Move to approve as amended.
Second.
Motion by Keelan, second by Fair, that we approve the agenda with that one amendment to it. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Against, say no. Motion carried. So in June, we had Planning Commission minutes. We had a public hearing, and then we also had our regular meeting in June. And Alan has said that already that we need to correct something in the minutes.
This is July we're talking about.
Oh, July.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, my arrival time in the minutes is listed as 5:63. It should be 5:53.
So actually, we should be approving July's public hearing, or minutes. Right?
Correct.
And not June. You already
That's a
approved June.
typo.
Yeah. Okay. I should have caught that, but yeah.
So Mayor, we could make a motion to approve the July 7th public hearing minutes?
I don't think we had a public hearing in July, did you
Yes.
guys? I wasn't here, but yeah.
We actually did it.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. so
Actually,
I'll make a motion then that we approve those public hearing minutes and the regular meeting minutes of July 7th, 2021.
All right.
Second.
I want to interject here, though. The agenda listed them as June minutes, and it should be July minutes.
That's why he's correct.
Yeah.
Okay,
And,
aye.
and the change that Alan brought up.
Right.
With the change.
All right. Geez, I hope it doesn't get any more complicated. Not ready for that tonight.
We're already in trouble.
Everybody understand what we're voting on? Any discussion?
Who made the second?
Me, oh, sorry, I made the motion.
Olson.
Fair, Olson?
Got it.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks for keeping us straight. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against, say no. Motion carried. So this is that amendment to the agenda. We have Joe Wolowitz, who is here tonight to speak to the City Planning Commission about an item that's not on the agenda. Joe, so you can do one of two things. Okay. You can either stand at the podium or you can sit in one of the chairs, but please speak into the microphone since we are on TV. We need you to have a microphone in front of you.
How about we just do it right here?
Thank you.
Hi. I'm going to lean on Aaron for a little bit on this because I'm just trying to figure out how this fits with respect to this body, because we're going to ask that question on the school.
Yeah, so well, they won't answer the question.
No, but just so I know that we're doing it correctly.
Yeah, so the Plan Commission takes up all suggestions for zoning changes in Chapter 17, which we've been working through for quite a bit. So this would be where anything to your conversation would start, and then it would move to council.
Okay, so my name is Joe Woloshevitz. I live at N2303 Ashley Court in Waupaca, town of Dayton. And we are looking at purchasing what is the old ballpark on County Trunk Highway E on the north end of Waupaca. And that particular piece of property is in the city of Waupaca, and it is currently at this time Zone B3. Sabretooth Enterprises and Sabretooth Commercial Driver Training are the businesses that I own. So one of the businesses there is a commercial driver training facility. That is a state-approved facility. We've been operating in the city of Waupaca for 10 years at this point. That particular piece of property is Zone B3. And that piece of property, if we are a school, we are eligible to use that piece of property as B3 zoning. In conversations with Jeff at zoning, he came back and said that they would tell this
Joe,
body.
would you just please tell us your case and don't tell us what somebody else has said?
Well, this is my case. My case.
But don't tell us what Jeff said. Jeff is on, so
Okay.
he can help us in the future on this. But you're just giving public input tonight.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the question is,
All right, you
The
just
question
tell us
is-
what you're looking for.
are we a school or are we not a school? Okay, we're certified by the state. We're certified through the federal government as a school. And so for us to do business in that building, we have to be a school. So if you don't want me to put in Jeff's portion of the input, then that's where that lies.
Sure. And we'll get Jeff's input. If we decide to put this on the agenda in the future, we'll get Jeff's input. He'll do some research on that and he'll get us that input, and you'll be notified if we decide to put this on the agenda in the future.
Okay?
Can you just talk about your two businesses though,
Sure.
please?
Sabretooth Enterprises is a Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration consultancy. We handle situations where trucking companies get audited, fail an audit. The Federal Motor Carrier comes in and issues a fine. We work through getting that trucking company going. In addition, that corporation owns something called Pegasus Project. Pegasus Project is drones that are attached to Wisconsin Emergency Management through DroneNet, through the Department of Veterans Affairs. So these are drones that we fly for the state in times of crisis or when people are missing, that kind of thing. So that's what Sabretooth Enterprises does. Sabretooth Commercial Driver Training then is the corporation that owns the driving school.
Okay, and so your concept is that you would like to purchase that property and you would like to run both of those
Both
businesses?
businesses out of there.
Okay. And so, and right now, it's Zone B3, and you feel like it fits within B3 because you are a school.
Right.
Okay. All right. So everybody understand what he's trying to do there? Okay. And so I don't think we're really prepared tonight to give the answer, but he did want to make a presentation to basically tell us what he would like to do with that property. And if we decide in the future to put that on the agenda, which I think we probably will, we'll see that in a future meeting, either our September meeting or October meeting to have that discussion. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you, Joel, for coming tonight and explaining that to us.
All right.
All right, action items. We have resolution number 1492. This is petitioning the Secretary of Transportation for airport improvement aid, and you can see that resolution is in your packet. And Aaron, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Yeah, that's fine. This is something actually that I talked with Sandy Stibbs, our clerk, on last week. And this is something that it's a formality. It has to go through Plan Commission to be eligible for FAA aid. Many of our capital projects, we get paid for, a lot of times 90% us matching 10%, 95%, 5%. So obviously large chunks are paid for through FAA money and BOA money. So this resolution is really nothing more than a formality that they say, hey, your city has to adopt this and it has to go through Plan Commission before anything else, allowing us to take advantage of that.
Yeah, and, you know, I don't know if you have any questions, but, and hopefully you had a chance to just go through it. But basically, it's just listing our items in paragraph form, our 5-year plan for improvements out there. And it does say in there that we would be funded on an individual basis, individual request basis, not on all of those items that are listed in there. I mean, that's what I got out of this, basically. So it's a requirement of the DNR that we have a resolution on file for that, and that's what we're doing. And again, since this is a resolution, I'm not, I should probably be, but I'm guessing this has to be recommended to council?
Yes, it does.
Okay. All right. Anybody have any questions on this resolution? Anybody like to make a motion to approve?
Motion approved.
Second.
Motion by Lesage, second by Keelan, that we approve or recommend to resolution 1492 to the city council. Any further discussion?
Brian, is there any money that we know is available in this particular resolution? I mean, obviously, there must be some grants that we're looking at.
There is. I don't know.
Yeah. We actually have a meeting next week with BOA representation out at the airport. Myself, our finance director, Kathy, and then Beth, our airport manager. And we are going to go over that 5-year plan that Mayor Smith mentioned. So yeah, there's money available out there. It's just working our capital plan and our match with what they have available at their level. And we'll have more information next week.
And most of those grants are, if I remember right, too, well, I know what they are. Most of them are either 80-20, they pay the 80, we pay the 20, or 70-30.
Yeah.
So they are very good grants that are available to us.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, let's go on. We approve that, right? Justin, did we vote?
No, we didn't vote on it. Did not even vote.
Okay, let's vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Against, say no. Motion carried. All right, so this next one is kind of a hold, or we're continuing forward on this property on Royalton Street. This is the certified survey map for 1035 and 1043 Royalton Street. And Jeff, you're going to do a better job of explaining this, so I'll let you take over.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is the Service Master property, or the former Service Master property. Plan Commission may recall last month we talked about the zoning change from B5 to B1 for these parcels. The zoning change and the land division were necessitated by the desire of the owner to split the parcel, selling the structure on the eastern side of the parcel to one property, or to one potential buyer, and then the western structure will go on sale to another. The proposed land division is compliant with the B1 zoning district requirements. You may recall the reason we were going to B1 from B5 was the setback requirements under B1 allowed for this property to be divided, whereas the B5 would not. Furthermore, it is in the city's interest or the city's plans to eliminate the B5 district. So any opportunity to zone properties out of B5 are opportunities that we've been taking advantage of. The proposed land division is compliant with the statutes. It is compliant with the subdivision and platting ordinance. And I'm recommending approval contingent upon 2 recommendations. One is that survey monument to be installed as is required under state law. But finally, and perhaps most importantly, that the final CSM not be signed, not be approved until the zoning change has been approved. So that process is ongoing. We had a discussion last night at Common Council. So effectively, if the Plan Commission recommends approval of the CSM will be finally approved upon approval of the zoning change. Hope that was relatively clear.
It is. So certified survey maps are are approved by City Planning Commission, or they have to be recommended to council, Jeff?
I wish I had the answer to that question right on the top of my tongue. I do not. Give me a moment, I will have that answer.
Thank you. Eric, the Brewers won.
They won last.
No, they got beat. They gave up
Is there any reason
5
why,
runs in an
is
inning.
there any reason why the building is shaking here every now and then?
Yeah, it's the road program.
Oh, it's the work, okay. Just wondering.
Did you notice that? What was going on?
Vibrating chairs, Pat.
I know, but it's all of a sudden.
Pat, none
it's
of us
kinda
know what
like-
you're talking about. It must just be you.
That's all in your head.
Yeah.
Hurry up, Jeff.
It's getting better.
Carry on, it'll just be a moment.
All right. Are we on?
You're live.
I won't tell a joke.
Well, I'll ask.
Does it have to do with getting the gutters clean, Mayor?
It does.
Well, I'll ask a legit question then, Aaron. Is this survey map that we're looking at any different than the one we looked at previously?
No. So this, what you're looking at right now, you can see the lot lines in black. You can do you see that?
Right, but when he approached us last month or before?
Oh no, everything's the same.
Everything's the same.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're obviously different from when they originally came in, but the idea was they split the property.
Yeah, okay.
So that's all there is to it.
Mr. Mayor, it is Plan Commission approval, not Common Council.
All right. Let's write that down somewhere, somebody. Thank you,
Yes,
Jeff,
sir.
for doing the research. Appreciate it. So what you would be doing is you would be not recommending this to council, but you would be approving this tonight at the city planning level. So we'd be looking for a motion to approve.
I'll make approve.
Contingent upon the zoning.
Yeah. Okay. Eric, you're okay with that?
Yep.
And who was the second? I'm sorry.
I will. I'll second.
Ivan, okay. So we have motion by Olson and second by Wayne that we approve certified survey map contingent upon the zoning changes there. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Against, say no. Motion carried. All right. I think stay close here, Jeff, obviously. So under discussion items, we have A and B there. The first one is discussion on commercial hanging signage, and I guess I need to know or we need to know what we're talking about when we say hanging signage here, and then we can talk about residential signage after that.
That sounds.
Mr. Mayor, I think Aaron's going to open this subject for discussion, and then I'll jump in.
All right, thank you.
So this is again to give kind of the real life application of this conversation and why it came up. There was a business in the downtown area that had recently installed some signage of the hanging variety. So if you think of like an overhang, whether it be a roof line or a canopy or something like that, this would be signage that would hang down from that overhang. It might be, yay big, a foot by 4 feet or something like that. That's the kind of signage we're talking about. Our code actually doesn't allow for hanging signage right now as it is. So we had the conversation, Jeff and I, and we said, hey, so our code doesn't allow it. We can't issue permits for this type of signage, meaning that someone who put it up is in violation, but does it really make sense not to allow this type of signage? And in our eyes, no, it doesn't. So that's the discussion here tonight. Jeff put a draft together with some standards, and I'll speak to that a little bit. I'll let him set it up, and then I'm going to bring up a point afterwards. But that's what we're here to do, to get hanging signage as a type of signage in our code so we could permit them in the future. So Jeff, I'll let you speak to the standards and your thinking behind it and what districts we're talking.
Thanks, Aaron. So we're talking about the B1 B2 and B7 districts. So the neighborhood, central business, and riverfront districts. That's at present. Now, certainly if the Plan Commission feels strongly that other districts should be opened up to this category of signs, let's have that discussion. I could foresee, and Aaron and I talked about this earlier today, I could foresee at some point in the future as the Fulton Street corridor becomes what I think we're hoping for it to become, where you would have businesses more oriented on more of a pedestrian, oriented on a pedestrian orientation as opposed to a vehicle orientation. I think there'd be reasons for hanging signs there now. But at present, we're talking about, again, B1, B2, and B7.
Jeff, I'm going to cut you off for just a second, just so plan commissioners know. B2 and B7, that's our downtown area. B1, remind us, Jeff, what area we're talking, B1?
The extenuating, it stretches outside of the B2, mostly to the east and to the south.
Okay, so downtown area extended.
So these are all districts where commercial structures tend to be close to the sidewalk, and the structures often have an overhang or some other architectural accoutrement that extends from the facade, whether that be an awning, a canopy, or something more structural. So the signs we're talking, I think Aaron did a great job of identifying. These are if this was a law office back in the good old days, we'd call it hanging a shingle. It's that sign that just hangs down from that overhang, usually relatively small. The standards I'm recommending were based on a couple different ordinances that include hanging signs. Surprisingly, there are not a lot of zoning ordinances in Wisconsin that actually have this category of sign, which means it's prohibited by law. So the standards that we're looking at is no more than 6 signs associated with a wall surface. Now, again, these signs are not affixed to a wall. That'd be a projection sign, a projecting sign. But the overhang or the canopy or this other structure, which would project from the wall, would be limited to no more than 6 signs in total and no less than 10 feet of separation between each sign. We're looking at a maximum face area, so maximum single side size of 4 square feet. Again, that's probably on the large side. Most of these tend to be 6 to 8 inches deep and 2 to 3 feet wide. The main thing we're looking at, though, is, and I think the part that the Plan Commission is going to want to weigh in on, is how much distance are we going to require from the sidewalk to the lowest portion or lowest part of this sign. Now, right now in the City of Waupaca zoning ordinance, awning and canopies must be no less than 9 feet above the finished grade. So that's the standard I applied. I think there's some discussion about whether the standard for hanging signs should be different. I'm going to kick that over to Aaron when it's his time. And then the other standards are towards the tail end of those tables. You'll see hanging signs may extend to a point not more than 2 feet in from the face of the curb. So we don't want them getting too close to the curb. And the sign shall be placed perpendicular to the building facade, not flush with the building facade. So again, it's not something that can hang this way to the building. It has to hang this way, if that makes sense. Aaron, jump in at your leisure.
Okay. So Jeff mentioned there probably will be some discussion on the distance from the sidewalk to the bottom of the sign. Obviously, one reason you'd want to have that is you don't want people walking, hitting their heads, doing other things, knocking up against it. The standard, as Jeff said, 9 feet. One thing, when you walk down our main street, and we're talking about downtown business districts right here, a lot of our old canopies, awnings are about 9 feet, which means that if we had a sign standard that was, we couldn't have them in those areas, which I think that's probably where they would be applied. Now, Jeff said there's many zoning codes that, the zoning codes that have the hanging signs typically have a standard of 9 or 10 feet. In our community, that would still prohibit a decent amount of these. So now the difference between 8, let's say we talked about 8 feet. Well, the difference between 8 and 9 feet that's kind of up to us to determine, does it cause safety problems? Does it cause more issues with people jumping up and hitting them? When you're walking, used to be the AD, and I don't remember many 8 feet tall basketball players coming through Waupaca, but it's not just about that. It's also obviously, riding bikes, carrying stuff, hitting them. So I just want you to understand that all of these things come into play. I just thought it'd be worth a discussion to say, do we want it at 8 feet? Do we want it at 9 feet? And, I guess that probably sums
I can
up the
jump with one other some information that might help. We've used the term awning and canopy because it's kind of hard to define some of these structures from which hanging signs are currently hanging. So the overhang that the term overhang that Aaron and I have been using, if you think about the Main Street Marketplace structure, so there's something that is similar to a canopy or an awning, right? It extends from the facade and it provides a covered walking service for the sidewalk below. It's not really a canopy, an awning, right? It's not something that could be easily removed, or it's not made of fabric or vinyl or something else. It's a structural, architectural element of the building. So these hanging signs could not hang, based upon the definition, from a fabric canopy. They would have to hang from something that is a structure. So if you look at the last page of this draft language, is the definition of a hanging sign would be a sign that is suspended from the underside of a surface and is supported by such surface, which means it would be pretty difficult to attach a hanging sign to a standard kind of retractable canvas or vinyl canopy. So I hope that helps a little bit.
So, going back to, I think I caught this and I want to make sure. So we're saying if we use Main Street Marketplace as an example, then, sorry if I jumped in front of any of you, but, so we're saying that when they put up that new canopy or whatever they call it, overhang, they're calling that, that's 9 feet from the sidewalk. And so if they wanted to put a hanging sign there, under this, they would not be allowed to do that. So is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay, so 2 things. One, do we want to allow hanging signs? And then second of all, are we okay with a height different than 9 feet, like either 8 feet or 8 feet 6 inches or 8 feet 8 inches or I mean, I'm short and I got jumping ability that could get over a piece of paper. But, so I mean, but I do think 7 feet seems like it's too low, obviously, but 8 feet seems like it's plenty high, too, to me. But that's just my opinion.
May I say something?
Sure, go ahead, Justin.
In the Public Works Code, obstructions and encroachments, there talks about trees and branches, and anytime it gets below 8 feet above a sidewalk, we have the right to go in there and trim that tree, no matter whose tree, where it is. So 8 feet above the sidewalk is the line we use.
Okay, so that would kind of go along with Public Works, quite honestly, if we use the 8-foot measurement.
Well, maybe to be safe, though, I'm just thinking out loud that maybe 8.5 feet might be something that way somebody hanging one and says, got to get your ruler out there and it's a 1/4 inch below, you might have trouble. But if you put it at 8.5, maybe that'll prevent that from happening from Justin's point of view.
I guess my point was I would go along with the 8 foot.
Yeah, so that would mean the bottom of that hanging sign
Yes.
could not be closer than 8 feet to the sidewalk.
I would be comfortable with that.
Okay.
So that's a minimum, right? Minimum of 8? So
Yeah,
they
it could always be
could
higher.
go higher.
Correct.
this would actually help too, because we probably have not only non-conforming signs in the downtown area that are hanging from these overhangs that have been built, but we also have signs that are sticking out from buildings too. And quite honestly, if we have nothing in here, those are non-conforming, no matter how high they are off the ground. So this would actually help that.
Yeah, I'm good with 8.
So, Mayor, if I just picking up on what you said a moment ago, if we don't do anything with this ordinance, then we already have some non-conforming things because we don't have an ordinance that allows for such things.
Right.
So we would technically, if we wanted to enforce that, meaning as it sits today without any changes, there's quite a few people that have to be notified. This would help to mitigate that by saying, okay, we got an ordinance, and most of those we would hope could fall into this category then.
Right. Right.
That was Mr. Fair, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Mr. Fair, you're right on, and forgive me for the terminology. They wouldn't be non-conforming. I'm sorry, they are not non-conforming. They are unlawful. There's a difference. Non-conforming would mean at one point they were a lawful sign and then the ordinance changed. These are signs that have never been allowed. So they are all unlawful. And what we're trying to do is find a way to make them.
Gotcha.
Well, and we're trying to make them lawful because we think that they should be allowed. We believe they should be allowed too.
Yeah, I see from staff standpoint, we see no reason to not allow hanging signs. They're attractive, they're informative, they're beneficial to the businesses that utilize them.
So Jeff, if you change I don't think we're looking for a motion, this was a discussion item, but if you change those 3 areas in the 3 different districts to 8 feet instead of 9 feet, then what's our next step?
The next step, Mr. Mayor, would be for this to go before the Plan Commission in a public hearing as a recommended amendment to the zoning ordinance.
Okay.
And that could be at the September meeting.
So my question then would be, if it, regardless of what the height is, let's say 8 feet, we agree upon, and we go through all of the process, and it becomes part of our zoning, then those who may be in violation would be notified that they would have to make a change, as it is today. I mean, in other words, we're not grandfathering in, are we?
No, sir, that would not be a provision in here. It would either establish an existing hanging sign that is compliant with these requirements as a lawful or conforming sign. It would not establish an existing sign that is not compliant with these requirements as a non-conforming sign. It would still be unlawful. And I say that because I suspect, I think Aaron can jump in with much more specific information, but I suspect there are overhangs currently in the downtown area where the bottom of the overhang is close to 8 feet above the surface of the sidewalk, which means any hanging sign would be in violation. And unfortunately, I don't know of a way around that to say, well, if you have a structure that's already closer to the sidewalk than is allowable for a hanging sign, we're going to make an exception and allow you to still put a hanging sign on it. That seems, I think, a bit problematic.
Yeah, right. I can't speak to how many or if that exists, but I'm sure I would guess there are examples of that. And if that was the case, when they came to change that sign or whatever it may be, they'd come forward with an application and then they'd have to meet the criteria that were passed. And if it didn't, then it couldn't be replaced.
Okay. So we're okay with him, with us moving forward with this, just changing the 9 feet to 8 feet. Anybody have any objection to that?
Jeff, can you explain the minimum street yard setback column? Does that mean the hanging signs have to be 11 feet off the property line?
It does not. So the 11 in brackets, if you scroll down to the table, the last, the notes at the bottom of the table, item 11 says hanging signs may extend to a point not more than 2 feet in front of the face, in front. This is easier to read than it is to say. Hanging sign point not more than 2 feet in from the face of the curb. So basically it's saying if you have a hanging sign, the closest part of that sign to the road may be no closer than 2 feet to the curb.
Okay. Yeah, so that's a footnote, not an actual foot.
Correct. Everything in brackets is a reference to the notes below.
Gotcha.
So I will, you're welcome. I will be a third additional footnote identifying the minimum distance between, or the minimum clearance between the bottom of a hanging sign, the finished grade, as 8 feet.
Okay, great. Let's go on to 4B then, and I know that we've beaten this up, but I think we need to continue to probably have discussion about this. But so this is discussion on residential signage. And I don't, Aaron or Jeff, I don't know which one of you want to start on this.
I can set it up, Mayor. So we've been back and forth on this. The reason I think we've brought this to Plan Commission in the first place is because we were getting some, I guess, input to our code enforcement officer, specifically on political signage. And that political signage just happens to be in residential lots. We wanted Plan Commission to understand that it can't be just political signage that is gone after from an enforcement standpoint. It's that type of signage on all residential lots. So if there was complaints about the Go Comet signs or the whatever it may be, it was an educational piece to that. That morphed into, okay, well, do we allow 1 per residential lot, but not 2 or more? After we've had conversations internally, and I believe this, whenever you raise a number, you're just going to push that. We could come back in a year and say, okay, do we allow, we've got a lot with 2, now do we allow 2 and do we go to 3? I also think that it could be likely that all of a sudden now we see commercial type advertising or signage permanently on residential lots scattered throughout the city. And is that what Plan Commission or Council wants?
But Jeff, in our zoning, though, sorry for interrupting you, Aaron, but I want to address that part of it right now. So let's say that a business, and I'm not talking about real estate signs, obviously, here, but let's say a business wanted to advertise on a residential property. Don't we have somewhere in our code where you cannot do that? I know that when I owned my business in town, I could not put a sign on the corner of Union and Main Street directing them to my property on Union Street, block and a half down on Union Street. There was something that disallowed me from doing that. So I would think that that would extend to residential too. Is that true or not?
Mr. Mayor, that is true, and I apologize. It's a simple question. It does not have a simple answer, but the shortest version I can give you right now is the sign that you're describing is called an off-premises sign. Most often we think of an off-premises sign as a billboard, but effectively what you're describing is an off-premises sign. The challenge associated with regulating off-premises signs post Reed versus Town of Gilbert is we can't use the content of the sign to make a determination of compliance. So if that sign says, eat at Brian Smith's barbecue pit, you can look at it and you can say, obviously, this is not at Brian Smith's barbecue pit, so this is an off-premises sign. But if you're prohibited from regulating based upon content, and the only way we can determine that this is an off-premises sign is the content, we're in a bit of a conundrum. Fortunately, Attorney Sorensen came up with a relatively clever, and I mean this with the greatest respect, a relatively clever way of addressing it through the application process, where when we have someone submit an application for sign permit, they have to identify the owner of the property, the owner of the business, and the owner of the sign. And if those don't all match up, the sign is clearly an off-premises sign, right? So if the owner of the business is Mayor Smith, if the owner of the property is Aaron Jensen, and the owner of the sign is Justin Behrens, and those are all different property addresses, we can say clearly, without looking at the content of the sign, that it's an off-premises sign. What Aaron's alluding to and what we've been discussing is not these kind of permanent signs, right? Like a billboard, but the kind of sign, as Aaron mentioned, the, Go Comets or Pete's Love and Understanding or whatever, those little typically metal signs that are about 2-3 square feet in size that you just stick in your yard and then a windstorm comes along and they're gone forever. What we were proposing at one point is allowing one of those signs without a permit on any residential parcel, meaning anybody could put it up. I think the maximum size was, Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we were talking about 4 square feet with a maximum height of about 3 feet off the ground. And that was it, right? So the concern that Aaron, I won't put on Aaron, let's say, what staff has discussed is if we allow that, whether it be one of these signs or 2, what happens when that sign or those 2 signs are not Go Comets, but Eat at Brian Smith's Barbecue Pit? And more importantly, what happens is if there are 100 of those Eat at Brian Smith's Barbecue Pit on 100 different residential parcels in the city of Waupaca. That's, Aaron, if that's fair enough, I think that's the concern allowing these signs, right?
Yeah.
Well, didn't we talk about this, and isn't the council wrestling with this right now? Didn't you guys get some information on that yet about how many signs the one? No, it hasn't gone to council.
Not this discussion, no.
No, okay. But that's sort of where we were headed, having one sign that was not a sign that had to do with a time frame. Like if you had a sign that said, fly in at the airport on June 7th, that's not in the same category because that has an end date anyway, and people wouldn't want to keep that up. But it's the kind that we were talking about, Go Comets, that has no end time. It could be up for 2 weeks, it could be up for 2 months or 2 years. But you could only have one of those in your yard.
Right.
Now, Mr. Fair is correct, and the sign he's referring to is the temporary sign, and that is now established within the zoning ordinance, as we've discussed. This sign, again, as Mr. Fair points out, would be a sign that goes up in a yard and it stays up basically as long as that property owner wants the sign to remain. And really, it's all about the unintended consequences, right? We want to, the proposal was to allow for the Go Comet sign or Not My President or whatever the case may be, allow everybody to have that one sign. The obvious unintended consequence being that what if some enterprise decided to take advantage of the fact that there are hundreds of residential lots in the city of Waupaca and use that as an opportunity to put commercial content signs up.
So I think I know the answer to this, but Pat brought up a question for me. Can you, on a temporary sign, can you require that they have an expiration date actually put on the sign?
That's a good question. If I had to come up with an answer now, I'd say probably not, because of again, it would be the content of the sign itself. And because we're not requiring a permit. It's a good question, Mayor Smith. I can certainly look into that if you'd like.
Well, it might help solve some of this if it's possible. It doesn't sound like it would be, well, who knows? You might find something. Yeah.
As we've discussed so many times, it's sign regulations are what give us more headaches than anything else.
So tell us again right now, to help me out again. Our zoning, as far as it concerns residential signage, what if we do nothing? What can they do right now?
Right now, they can have one temporary sign And that's the real estate sign, the yard sale sign, campaign signs, that category that we've discussed. They can have one wall sign that cannot exceed 1 square foot, take that back, 2 square feet in area. And that wall sign could say, Aaron Jensen's quality widget repair or something. So it's just a wall sign that typically would advertise a home occupation. Beyond that, all other signs in the residential districts are in the R1 and R2 districts are prohibited. The one exception is subdivision signs. So signs that announce the name of a subdivision. So, Pleasant Estates or whatever the case may be. But beyond that, that's it.
So if somebody's doing a new roof or on a house and they want to advertise that they're doing that, that's not allowable currently?
That is allowable as a temporary sign. So that sign could go up no earlier than 5 days prior to the work on the roof commencing. It would have to be, 15 days prior to the work on the roof commencing. And it may be up no longer than 5 days after the roof work completed. So that would be allowable, or is allowable, I'm sorry.
Okay, and then that would be the same as a campaign sign, same days that you're talking about.
Yes, sir, the same basic framework, that's correct.
And that's where we kind of fell into a conundrum, or whatever you call it, because people do put up political signs for a lot longer than 15 days.
Well, they'll put up more than one at a time, too. A judge and a governor and president can all be running at the same time. And if I want to support all three of them, I couldn't put up 3 signs.
Under state law, you could, Alder Gillen. So we can't, state law would preempt the city of Waupaca from putting a limit on the number of campaign signs. We can establish size maximums. If I remember, the state law allows for a sign 11 square feet in area. We could allow a sign larger, but we can't limit a campaign sign to smaller than 11 square feet. But I do want to, and again, just forgive me because words are important when it comes to zoning ordinance. Campaign signs are what we're discussing, and campaign signs would be associated with a candidate. Political signs, signs that express some political opinion, that's not allowable right now, and that would not be allowable.
Right, I think there's a lot of rules and regulations that are already on the books for campaign signs because they have a shelf life, basically speaking. But it's the ones that don't have a shelf life that we've run into with the problem. And I thought when we were talking about it last time, we said those, Go Comet fans signs which have no specific date, one would be allowable, but more than one, then if you wanted to put something else like the Arts on the Square, something, I don't know, you might have to take one down and put the other up, but only have one without a shelf life per resident.
That's correct, Mr. Farrer. That was the, I don't know if recommendation is the right word, but that was the discussion we had. What happened in our regular Wednesday meetings is staff started to talk about, what's the worst thing that could happen if we allow that sign? And seemingly the worst thing that could happen would be a concerted effort on the part of one party or a number of parties to place signage on all, or at least as many residential properties as possible, whether those were politically based, commercial based, or other. Is the cost associated with that worth accepting to allow for the one sign? And I think that's the discussion that we as staff had.
Jeff, one thing we didn't have a discussion about is every one of these, let's say 50 residential units decided to do this. Those would all have to go through a sign permit process, I'm assuming?
You're talking about a multifamily complex?
No, let's just take 50 single-family residential. If 50 of them in the city wanted to, they'd have to go through a sign permit process, so that's something processing now. Is that correct?
No, and forgive me, I suspect I'm misinterpreting something, but if we were to move forward with this one residential sign, it would not require a sign permit.
Okay, thank you.
Well, as Jeff was talking about, if a lot of people wanted to, in a city, a whole group of people, sort of a concerted effort to put one kind of sign or vacant lots that they own. I mean, ordinances, as we're finding out, they're somewhat fluid. I mean, we would have to deal with that if it happens. But I think the big concern that came before us to this point was how many signs one person in their yard can have that are not temporary signs. And I think if we deal just with that issue alone right now, we kind of centered on just having one of those non-time signs.
Okay. And that's still where you stand after the conversation.
That's where we stood the last time we had this discussion. And I think that part of the discussion, if we could agree on and move forward with, and then the council are going to get a kick at the cat at this too, so be it. But I think you could say that.
Yeah, let's kick cans, not cats.
But anyway, that's kind of where I think we are. I don't know.
So, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Has something come up? Is that why this has come to question? Is this like an ongoing issue?
Well, it's just been an issue of us not really regulating it because of us bringing it forward here to educate what that would look like. And it came back because this was a new conversation amongst staff that we didn't bring to Plan Commission in the first place of this negative possibility. So, yeah, I mean, I agree with Pat on whatever the direction is tonight, either 1 or 0. 0, we wouldn't have to change anything. We would just start sending, sending notifications out. 1, we would draft something an amendment that would say that. Then it would go to Plan Commission Council and through the process.
Well, but I think there are examples, if you were to drive around town, that make us want to discuss this. You'll see signs, some political signs out there. You'll also see commercial signs where like I said, somebody that just did your roof and that sign might sit in their yard for 2 months afterwards, after they finished your roof, not just while they're doing the roof or a couple days after. I mean, those are just a couple of the examples that are there. I don't want to go to the level where personally, I don't want people not to be able to put anything in their yards. Quite honestly, I think they should have the ability to put Comet Pride or something in their yard, or whatever their thoughts are on that. So I would certainly hate to go that direction. And I think I said this a couple months ago too, quite honestly, once you start mowing lawns, you're going to be picking those signs up and putting them away anyways, because you're not going to want to mow around them. So, yeah.
Well, and there's nothing prevents a person to putting up a Comet Pride sign for 2 months and taking it down and then putting up something about their church or whatever. You can change them out. One is still the only one. I think what we have found is in some neighborhoods, people have complained, at least I've heard, because somebody will have 2 or 3 or 4 signs in their yard and may want to leave them up there all the time.
Jeff, that brings up a good point too. So Jeff, and I know that we don't enforce that at the city level, but would city law trump covenants?
Generally, no. Restrictive covenants associated with development agreements for subdivisions are an additional layer of regulation outside of the authority of municipal law.
So, I mean, if we're talking vacant lots, we're probably talking developable property. And so they probably have some sort of covenants in those areas. So if they really felt the vacant lots were an issue, they could handle that differently.
That is correct.
I'm okay with trying the one sign type thing, to tell you the truth. again, is this going to solve all the problems? You're still going to see some political signs up there, and it's not going to be your person probably that's got the sign up there. So, and something might be offensive to you, but I think it's a good place to start.
And what's the process if they continue doing like we talked about last week, one Go Comet sign and one go check out the art fair event at this day? What's the process for if they have that instead of the one? Then they get a letter, or the city can just go pick it up?
No, they would get a letter. But Jeff, I'll let you speak to it.
And Ms. Lesage, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, Ms. Lesage, as Aaron alluded to, when I want to preface this by saying it's the least enjoyable part of a zoning administrator's responsibility. We are obligated by law to administer and enforce the code. So if the code says you cannot have a sign on a residential property, at some point the zoning administrator must send letters to every property that has a Go Comet or Comet Pride sign or Not My President sign or Peace, Love, and Understanding or whatever. Because to not do that would then be, it's called selective administration and selective enforcement. In other words, do I have the authority of the zoning administrator to say this is in violation, but I'm not going to administer and enforce that? This is, and I will administer and enforce that one. So the short answer to the question is, the shorter answer to your question is a notice of potential violation goes out saying, listen, we've received word that there may be a violation here. Please contact me so we can bring this property into compliance. If no action is taken, there's a compliance order that goes out and that says your property has been determined to be in violation. You have X number of days to bring it into compliance. Step 3 is it goes to compliance and it goes to circuit court with the citation. So I think, I can't imagine anybody wants to go through that process for a Comet Pride sign. Unfortunately, that's not the sign that will be the problem. It'll be some other sign that the community will be up in arms against, whether it's because of profanity or vulgarity in the message, or whether it be content outside of that is offensive to people. If we allow this one sign, we have to allow that too, because First Amendment protects that speech. So forgive the long answer, but this is just a really, really difficult topic.
Can I get a clarification on this? Again, I'm pretty sure I know the answer from this, but we are only talking about residential signs that are on their property. Obviously, these signs cannot be on city property, meaning, normally we think of from the sidewalk to the street, that little green space in between there, that's actually city property, and they would not be able to place their signs there.
Yes, sir, that's correct. You cannot place signage or any other structures on the terrace between the sidewalk and the street without some approval. Some communities allow raised bed gardens and prairie plantings and things like that, but generally some approval is required from the municipality.
And Angela asked one other question too that I'd kind of like to hear the answer to it too. You don't go on their property and just take the sign down.
No, sir, that would be a violation of a whole bunch of different laws. The city has the authority to notify any resident at any time with 24 hours notice that they will be entering their property. You cannot enter the structure, but officers of the city of Waupaca, when I say officers, I don't mean police officers, although that applies too. The city administrator, the Department of Public Works director, the zoning administrator, plan commission members have the authority to enter any piece of property in the city with appropriate notice, if the purpose of that is to determine whether there's a violation. We do not have the authority to remove something staff from the property. We can identify a violation, we can take the steps to bring the property into compliance. But if there's a sign there that is clearly in violation, that sign stays there until the property owner removes it or until the court orders it to be removed. At that point, then the city could take action.
Okay. Anybody else have any other questions on this?
You know, with overlapping of sports, come August, I'd like to put 2 signs in my yard. One, Go Packers, and one says Go Brewers. But I guess I wouldn't be able to.
Unless you have one sign that meets the size requirements and half of it says Go Packers and the other half says Go Brewers.
Gotta get
College
creative.
match.
Alder Keel, give me a call when that time comes. I won't be working for the city anymore, but I'll help you figure a way around the rules, all right? Just kidding, Mayor Smith.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff.
I guess I understand where we're coming from and why we're doing it for those specific reasons. I do feel like we're being a little restrictive, but that's just my 2 cents.
I think one
Yeah.
sign is too restrictive myself. I would buy 2 signs.
I
So
personally
again, the
don't have any
situation
signs
right
in my
now-
yard, but
So the situation right now, the default, the current situation is none of these signs are allowed, period. No exceptions. That is the case in almost every municipality. And frankly, almost every municipality just chooses not to, don't ask, don't tell, including my fair city here, the city of Appleton. The problem is it somewhat challenges us. There will be someone who challenges us at some point. We have to be able to say, you can't put that sign up. And their attorney is going to say, well, yeah, but here's 100 different properties within a 2-block radius that have this sign up, yet you've not sent any notices to them. This is an arbitrary, capricious action against my client. We'll see you in court. That's the difficulty. It's the First Amendment stuff, adult entertainment, religious institutions, and signage that are the most challenging to address within zoning regulations, because they run against common sense. But everybody agrees that there should be a right for me as an individual to express my opinions on my own property. Just how do we do that?
So Alan and Angela both said they would be okay with 2 signs, and I'm going to put my 2 cents worth in on that too. I'm okay with 2 signs also, quite honestly. So, I mean, instead of it saying 1 sign, we put 2 signs in there. I would be okay with that.
Now, this is just discussion tonight, right? And
Well, it is,
It would direct us to draft. So
but they're going
Right,
to draft
right.
with that in there.
We'll prepare draft language representing our understanding of the Plan Commission's desire. So it would be 2 non-permanent residential signs, and we'll qualify the structure, because we can regulate the structure, right? We can regulate its size, its height, its location, and including things like the depth. So we could prohibit someone from putting in 2 4x4 posts and putting their 2 square foot or 4 square foot message in. I'm assuming that, I shouldn't assume, let me ask a question. When U.S. Plan Commission members envision signs, am I correct that we're talking about those wiry kind of signs that you can pick up, put in the ground, pick it up, take it away, put it someplace else on the property? Is that correct?
yes, in my opinion.
yes,
yes.
Yeah,
That's the way I'll draft the language.
good.
Mary, I just have one more thing. And I'm fine with whatever way Plan Commission wants to go. Jeff said something before, very, very briefly, and I just want to make sure that is well understood. So if, Jeff, I think you said something about if there's a sign that said expletive this person, whether it's a candidate or a whatever, that could fully exist on a property if we have this, and we would have we couldn't do anything about it, correct?
That's correct.
We
The
can't.
only ability for local government to regulate the content of a sign is if the sign incites violence, incites insurrection, and there are some other terms that have been identified with, you can't scream fire in a crowded theater, right? There are those aspects of this that are regulated, but profanity, vulgarity, that is not regulatable by local That is not regulatable by local government.
Well, I get that, but, even though we prohibit signs, we had signs all over the city, and I have not seen anything like that. You know, so I mean, I know that we probably should talk about that, but I don't see that happening.
And just to clarify, so for the 2 signs, are we still then allowing 1 temporary sign? Or are we saying that's like the event? Is that included in our 2 signs? Or are we saying like we're allowing 2 signs, Go Comets, Go Badgers, plus an Arts on the Fair sign?
Well, I think that if I'm understanding right, those signs have already been regulated because they're temporary. So there's some rules about temporary, like the political aspects. But the ones that we're talking about have no time limits, right? So if you had one up that said, there's a art show coming up on such and such a date, you could put that in addition to, because it's already got a regulation on when it needs really to come down. It's got a shelf life.
Is that
The
accurate,
short
Jeff?
answer again is that those, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, is that accurate?
Yeah, the short answer is the temporary signs would exist as they are. And then in addition to 1 temporary sign meeting the requirements currently in the code, we would have these 2 other signs. So those 2 other signs could in fact carry messages that are identical to the temporary sign. So maybe one of the temporary signs announces the school year and another one announces, whatever, because those other 2 signs would not be content based and would not be tied to a specific event or a specific time. So the short answer again would be we would allow 3 of these wire framed ground signs in every R1 and R2 parcel in the city.
Okay, then I'm going to change my statement from previous. I think that 2 signs should be allowable. 1 is the Go Comets and 1 is the event. So if you really wanted Packers and Badgers up at the same times, or Brewers, you could put that up for the game.
Right beside my Comet sign.
Yeah, that's my opinion. So I just wanted to retract my previous. I don't think you should have 3 signs in your yard.
And I disagree.
Well, we gotta come to a consensus.
Yeah.
If you haven't noticed, I haven't seen a sign that I don't like, so I'm a tough vote here, so.
Next time you're in Appleton, knock on my door, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple I can show you.
I can certainly jump in, throw my hat in for saying that I do want to move beyond 0. I definitely want to put my hat in for 1. 2 is still a discussion topic that, I would entertain, but certainly 1 minimum. To address one of the previous, where the conversation got started with the business, one of my thoughts is, I don't think our fear is that a business would coercively go at 3 a.m. and dot the entire town with these signs, and that they would happen to stay because people were just not committed enough to go clean up their yard. But if there were a business that would happen to gain some traction in town and there would happen to be 70 signs around town, my first inkling is that for each individual residence, that would be what they were into. That would be what they chose to support, just like the Packers. And if one of our worries was like financial coercion, well, even if when I say go Pack go, at some point that is trickling, a financial investment and a support, both personally and financially, for the Packers. So to me, it's not too much of a concern. I still am on the fence as to whether I would fully, support 1 or 2 at this time, but certainly 1, not 0.
So, do we feel comfortable, Pat, what is your?
Well, we're basically between 1 and 3 here, but I think I feel comfortable with Jeff's advice and with the city staff that you guys can draft something with a number you feel that you are really comfortable with, and then we'll look at it. If we had to do nothing more than discuss it again to change just a number, so be it. But at this point in time, I'm kind of leaving it up. I would leave it up to you. Everybody's argument, makes sense. I think what we're trying to avoid is somebody who puts up a zillion of them in a yard. We don't want that. But I don't know what the magic number really is here. I would like to think no more than 2. I mean, I live, as all of us do, with neighbors, and they have a sign up here and maybe one over there on their yard, and that's, I don't mind that, but I don't want them to see, you know, this one and this one and this one. That just detracts, I think, from a neighborhood. I think there's got to be some number that we regulate.
I think Mr. Fair brings up an interesting point, something I hadn't considered. That is, perhaps instead of in addition to, we supplant the temporary sign. So what if we were to remove the temporary sign requirements entirely from the zoning code and basically say you are allowed to have 2 signs on a residential property, neither of which can exceed, you know, these specific dimensions, and they can be whatever you want them to be. They could be a real estate sign or a yard sale sign or associated with something that has a stop and an end date, or it could be 1 Brewers and 1 Packers sign. So that way we kind of, I don't know, King Solomon the issue a bit. Is that more amenable, or do we want to keep and maintain this 1 temporary sign as a separate category?
I'd like to hear Eric. You were about to speak before.
I was about to say something, and then he said that, and I kind of like that idea. I was going to say the only time I see an issue with signs in town is around contested elections, and that goes away. So I don't see a ton of signs anywhere, really. I don't see an issue. If we say 1, we're going to have people that complain and say it's my right to have 2. Even if they don't even want to have 2, they're going to say it's my right, and somebody's going to complain. And I think we go with the 2. What his idea, I'm on board right there. That covers it.
Angela, you're still sticking with the 2, basically, and do you like Jeff's idea that he just said? Okay.
I can draft language both ways, if you'd like. So we can provide one model that keeps temporary signs in existing and then has either 1 or 2 additional, or to just go with these 2 signs and get rid of the temporary language.
Well, let's keep going here, because I got 2 votes so far that say that they like your idea, and I'm moving on. So, Ivan, how about you?
I will. Yes, I agree.
Okay, and I'm okay with doing that too, knowing that you can always use a eraser on a pencil in the future.
And I would still hold out for 2 plus.
Okay, and Pat?
I'm good with what Jeff suggested.
Yeah.
Justin, you still awake?
Yep, I'm here. I would say I think 1 temp sign, with the exceptions of political signs, because that falls back, I believe, on state statutes, right, Jeff? But I think Jeff's idea sounds fair. I'd like to see the wording on it.
Okay, let's go in that direction then, Jeff.
Yes, sir.
All but 1 agree to your most recent idea. Thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome, Mr. Mayor.
All right, let's move on. Before we get into the reports and before I forget, Aaron, do you want to just touch on City Planning Commission actually started this, and we had the first reading last night that has to do with the light ordinance. So you want to just touch on that, just so the Planning Commission knows where we are with that?
Yeah, so this last time was the second time the lighting ordinance was in front of council. It came back for a second first reading because the first time we brought it forward, there was some holes in it. Alan is an expert in lighting, who knew? So he gave us some good input in drafting it the second time. We have been working with Chief Hozell, the police department, myself, and then Tom Hart actually drafted the last version of the ordinance. So it's an ordinance that is based off of measuring lumens at the property line, any greater than 5 feet at the property line. So that's the direction it's headed. The exemptions are pretty much, I think, maybe the exact same as what they were in the first one, and I would expect a second reading to come forward and likely be passed maybe next council meeting. So, does
Sounds
that cover
like
it,
it.
Mayor?
Yep. Thank you, Aaron, for that.
Yep.
You want to go into your reports then?
Yeah, sounds good. The first one is Jeff's report. It's an internal site plan review, so I'll let you go through that, Jeff.
Thanks, Aaron. As Plan Commission recalls, there are the zoning ordinance is constructed upon site plans in commercial or non-residential districts coming before the Plan Commission for review. At the Plan Commission's discretion, you can delegate that authority to staff when it is of a somewhat inconsequential nature, a small structure, or just a relatively minor change to a site plan. So these are the 5 that came before us in the month of July. One is at 233 Industrial Drive. It's a WPS property. They replaced a control house, a small control house on the property. We had 2 of the these Quick Trips each added outdoor freezers to the Quick Trips. Both of those were reviewed and approved on the same date in July. Item E is listed as pending, and it was pending when I wrote this report. Subsequent, we've actually approved it. So OSI, FV, and Aaron can probably provide more applicable information as to what that structure is at 102 Grand Seasons Drive. It's a change of use, but they also replaced what was an existing drive-through structure with effectively more office space. The change occurred within the same or substantially the same footprint. So there really was no real difference to the exterior of the structure. Item D is complicated. 2245 South Apple Tree Lane is Midwest Compressor LLC. It's zoned B4. There is a single-family dwelling. The owner of the single-family dwelling is the owner of the property and the business. Single-family dwellings are not an allowable use in the B4, so it's a non-conforming use. The owner would like to replace a porch with a deck, but there are some compliance issues with the property, so that is going to take some time to get through. So that's the internal site plan review report.
So that Apple Tree Lane property, that is the house and the business are both within the city limits?
Yes, sir. I think Aaron can allude to this, but I believe it's property that was annexed into the city, and it's a single-family dwelling with 2 relatively large commercial structures. There are some issues regarding parking, meeting the parking requirements, and there are some issues regarding outdoor storage. And until we bring those into compliance, we cannot issue a permit for a non-conforming use. Basically, this individual is not allowed to put a deck on his property or their property until we bring the property into compliance.
So this was a property that we had a development agreement with. I'm assuming that must be up because you're not aware of it, Aaron. But
Right, yeah, I don't think it's still
so this was a development agreement that helped him to expand his business on that property at one time. So, okay, thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome, Mr. Mayor. That's it for me tonight. Have a good night, everybody.
Yeah, you too.
See you, Jeff. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Next, everyone, is just the July permit reports. Again, just building permits. I talked with the building inspectors today. Nothing really out of the ordinary here. As we scroll through it, no huge dollar amounts either that would speak to a large commercial project or anything. Signage, HVACs, air conditioners, plumbing, electrical, all of that. So
when they sorry for interrupting you, but let's say, for example, when you take like the county of Waupaca where they're doing improvements or relocating their 911 center and it's like 150 grand, do we still get permit fees for that?
we do, yes.
And that's why you put a dollar amount on it? Is that why?
Yeah, so in that situation, the permit fee would be, our fee that we collect is estimated off of what their cost is to that project, yeah. So that's why we have the construction value and the fees there. Yep. Any other questions on the permit fee report for July? All right. Code enforcement, again, this is really bare, not much code enforcement, and this is really probably a byproduct of, again, our code enforcement officer plus building inspector and probably more focused on building. lately. Summer, busy time with that, less time being allocated to code enforcement. Our police department have been really good, I will say, in helping our code enforcement officer with things like grass that needs to be cut. You know, they're sending pictures and doing that when they're on their regular patrols, which is great. So give them credit for cooperating, and but nothing noteworthy there. And then from a development report, nothing really substantial that really can be shared at this time. Some visible projects. Starbucks they're waiting on, it's again, supply chain problems with materials. So they're waiting on some materials. It's probably going to push them into October-ish is when they're hoping to get it completed. Ruby's Pantry is moving along, working with Jane in all of their building meeting code, and they're looking at a similar time frame for what they're doing. But other than that, really nothing huge. Our River North project, we're starting to have those discussions about, okay, we have the River North plan and the concept plan right now. We're having conversations with people within the community as to what do we need to do to meet the housing needs of the community, and how do we pair all these needs together, and then kind of reach out to those potential developers to bring forward a proposal in the future. So those things are happening, but nothing huge right now. So, Mayor, anything, you're involved in all those discussions, anything I'm missing there?
No, why, I think I have a couple comments, but I want to ask you about, because I don't know anything about this, the project that's down on the corner of North Main and Session Street is boarded up. Are they in a holding pattern, or is stuff happening behind the scenes there that we can't see?
Good question. Stuff is happening behind the scenes. It's a little bit it's on a holding pattern in the commercial on the first level, but the residential upstairs, they are making good progress. I went on a tour, it was probably over 3 weeks ago now, but a lot of work being done. Upgrading, that's 4 units up there. And then they're still working through some things on the commercial level with the building owner and the people that are going to rent it eventually. So,
Aaron, just anecdotally, I don't know if you happen to see, but talking about affordable housing, the Appleton Post-Crescent did a long article on how communities can get involved with affordable housing. I don't know if you saw that. It was just within a week, really a pretty extensive article that they researched. And there were some really good ideas in there about how to go about that. And they highlighted communities in the Fox River Valley, but obviously we're close enough. But they're trying to do the same things you're doing. You might just look at that. It did have some pretty good information.
yeah, I didn't see that. I appreciate that. I'll just have to borrow your login.
Yeah. Well,
But no, I'll look for it.
it was within the last week. Library might just have the paper copy, actually.
Cool. No, I appreciate that.
Well, and go along with that too. Thank you for that segue, actually, Pat. The city has received some ARPA funds from the federal government, which are being, of course, the Wisconsin Department of Revenue is actually controlling how those funds can be used. But a couple of the things in there will be related to city planning, and one of them has to do with affordable housing and stuff too. So I'll bet you that's the direction that Appleton is going in.
Well, it highlighted in their counties in the state and how the cost of a single-family home has risen dramatically. We all know that, but what's happened is it's also risen dramatically in counties that don't have large populations as much. I mean, as well. We all think, city houses are going way up, but actually some of the smaller counties, and I don't know if it mentioned Waupaca, population-wise, have gone up, and I'm sure Angela knows this too, exponentially. And so, and a lot of these areas are where people who don't have the same financial resources are trying to live, which is why it's a big problem.
Absolutely. And you couple that with the new apartment buildings that are coming into town and have to get more rent based on what they're paying to build those things. It's making it more difficult. The only other thing I want to add, and I can only add a little bit to this, is that you do know that we're in the process of trying to hire a community economic development director, which would be one of his main jobs would be to handle the city planning commission. We will not have somebody in place by the September city planning commission. We hopefully will know who that person is by then, but his first meeting or her first meeting, either or, would be the first meeting in October, actually. So, but we're getting there. Yeah. I think that's all I have.
That's all I have, Mayor.
Is there any reason to think we wouldn't meet, we'd meet anytime before the September regular meeting, Aaron? Nothing coming up?
No reason to think that now. No.
But remember, though, that September 1st is the first Wednesday, so it's the very first day of September that we're meeting. Okay? I think it's the first. It might be the second, but I'm pretty sure it's the first.
Move to adjourn.
Motion by Keelan, second by Olson to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against, say no. We're adjourned at 6:41 PM. Have a great night. Drive safe. Brewers won.